All right, so just a quick recap. In case we had a few people who couldn't make it last time, so I didn't know if they were going to jump on this time. So I just want to do a couple recaps in the beginning. This first part, we're talking about what is youth mental health first aid, which we did last week, and we'll review that. And then we talked about adolescent development and the prevalence of mental health. And then this week, we're going to jump into the youth first aid action plan and the signs and symptoms piece a little bit. That's where we're going to start. But before the end of the day, we are going to start getting into part 2, where we're going to start to apply that first aid action plan. So you're going to get a first couple of pieces. You can do some non-crisis kind of practice in the next week and see, we'll bring that information back and see how we did and see, what we learned about ourselves or what we feel more comfortable with, right? As you practice, you'll get better with things. Other reminder what we're here for. This is the help that we are offering young people who are experiencing a mental health challenge, mental disorder, or a mental health crisis. First aid is given until appropriate help is received or until the crisis resolved. Reminder, you are not here to diagnose or provide treatment. You are providing first aid, just like we do when somebody has a physical health emergency. There is first aid until EMS can get them to some other treatment. So that's where we're at. Just those reminder. The first thing I wanted to start with is kind of going through each portion of the action plan. We briefly touched on some of these last week, but I thought it would be good for us to just make sure that we go through each one of them. And then I actually have, this is a nice linear fashion, but some people learn better by having an image to go with things. And so I have that for you next so that we can hit all of the kind of those different parts of your brain to see which one works for you. The other thing I want to point out is, remember, at the bottom of the screen, we have these little book things that show page 23. So that's back in this manual, remember? You have that. So if you go to page 23 in here, and I'm trying to flip there real quick, you will have the beginnings, and it's a little box at the bottom of that page that talks about the action plan. So if you're looking for the place to take notes or put stickies in, that's where it would direct you. And as we go through, if you see those book titles, they refer to the pages in your manual. Okay, so our action plan. The first piece to our action plan, as you see on the screen, is to assess the risk of suicide or harm. The first thing is to make sure that everybody is safe, right? Yes, they're in crisis, and so it could turn and become unsafe, but we want to assess, because if somebody needs some physical intervention, then we want to do that first. Okay, I thought I saw a hand go up, so I'm gonna, Jessica, did you have a question? Uh-oh.
Oh, no, sorry, I bumped sorry.
Okay, I just want to check, because I don't mind. If you have a question and need me to stop, I want to stop so that you're thinking about it, okay? All right, so we're going to assess the risk for suicide or harm. We're actually going to do that piece several times throughout the action plan here. So we'll come back to that one as well. The next piece is to listen non-judgmentally. And those are kind of the first two that we're going to do a little work with. Think about this tonight a little more in depth and get some kind of details and do some discussion around. Okay. We're going to also talk about giving reassurance and information. And we're going to talk about what is appropriate information to be giving at this point in time. We want to encourage appropriate professional help. And it says appropriate because that may be different for each individual that you are working with. We want to encourage self-help and other support strategies. So that would include having the student think about what's going to help them. And so that's where we're going to get a lot of input from the student as well, the youth in there, because they need to be involved in that when it's got self-help involved, right? That can't be us. What happened to my imagery? Hold on one second. Let me check my background. There should be an image in there for y'all. Hold on, let me make sure I got the right presentation up. So because that was a big warning sign right there to me. Those are fine. Thank you for your patience. I want to make sure that you all get the image that you need, that we have. Yes. Okay, so I think something happened in my saving, but I'm bringing it right back to you right now to make sure that as promised, that image is coming up to you. Whoops. Thank you for your patience. Okay, here we go. Here's the image I was hoping that you were going to see next. That's coming up for you. So you can see the one thing I like about after we go through the steps is showing you this piece is that there's a couple things to keep in mind about our action plan. We're going to go through it kind of in the order I presented it to kind of give you some flow to it, but you won't necessarily go in that order constantly. You always have to kind of start with assessing or approaching. That's always kind of your entry point. Typically, because you're going to have to often make a conversation. There will be a few times that maybe a youth opens something for you and then you won't have to do the approach. The approach is already done. But it might be a different order that you do stuff in, right? Maybe the student has opened the door and in their conversation with you, they've talked about, this used to really help me and now it makes me angry. And that's a self-help thing and helping them to find something else that doesn't make them angry. And so you may actually start talking to them about what helps them, and then they may get into more about what's triggering that anger and why it's different than it used to be. So you might start with encouraging self-help strategies because they're just talking about those to begin with, and then come back to listening. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in the order I presented. So that's why I like this circular diagram for you. I also, if you notice, assess kind of in this diagram the A takes on kind of two different pieces. The assess that I said we need to constantly do, but they also talk about in that is the approach and how you approach a youth who you think might be doing that, how you start, because that first step is always kind of the hardest. And so they wanted to honor that with this new piece. So even though we call it ALGAE because it's easier to remember that way with a nice acronym that makes a word, everybody likes an acronym that makes a word, so it's easy to remember. You don't have to always do it that way. Okay, and so this circular diagram is there for you to kind of give you that piece. Now, that has not made it in your manual. As far as I know, the new manuals are just being printed shortly. I haven't actually seen the new participant manual with this in it. So that's why I wanted to make sure that you have this. This would be the one time they do not encourage you to take screenshots of this for being copyrighted information, but this screen I would encourage you to take a screenshot of because you don't have this in your manual. So if you are an image person, go ahead and take a snap if you can, however it makes sense to you. I've had youth pull out their phones and actually snap it and save it in their photos because they always are scrolling through their photos. So then every once in a while they come across it. So this would be the one time that if you are a visual person, this is a good kind of reminder for you. Well, your book does have it in the kind of linear format if that's a better learning tool for you. Okay. So we have both of those there. All right, now we'll jump into the next thing that we're going to do this evening is talk about signs and symptoms. Right before we left last time, we talked about kind of what a typical adolescent looks like. What are some changes? What are some things happening to them? Just to kind of ground ourselves in what is adolescence. For some of us, right here, it's been a few years since I've actually gone through adolescence. I am watching children go through it, but it is a little bit different than experiencing it yourself. So that's why we did that kind of activity at the end, was just kind of ground ourselves in the changes that they're feeling that we don't necessarily see before we do signs and symptoms. You did a great job with that. So I have no qualms that we need to go back over and discuss anything like that. There is no glaring problems that we missed. You kind of had all nailed it about like what physically happens, what socially happens, what emotionally happens, what mentally happens. We nailed all those kinds of pieces down. So now we're going to look at signs and symptoms. And I first wanted to just take a moment to make sure that we define both of those words so that we all are using the same vocabulary as we talk together in this space. So they're very close. Basically, signs are observable. Okay, so we can see the physical or we can see the emotions kind of playing on a student's face. The symptoms are things more that the youth might be feeling, and they'll have to self report to us. We won't necessarily see them. Symptoms can also come out in signs, but signs are the things that we are actually going to observe, and symptoms are the things that we're going to be told about when youth are sharing with us during this time frame. Okay, so that's just one thing to kind of think about as you go through, like, what are the signs I'm seeing? And then to be listening for what are the symptoms that they're sharing about. And we're going to practice that in a little bit. So don't worry. But before we go there, we should know what we're looking for and listening for. So we have just a little bit to go through here with signs and symptoms. Real brief, what I'm actually going to do is you can see that we have a little clue. We're going to start with signs and symptoms of physical. I'm going to open up a whiteboard again. Remember, we did this last time. And if you want to add anything on the whiteboard, I'm going to divide it up once again. We're going to talk about what might be in each one, but we're going to jump back and forth a little bit more with this. And then we're going to get into I don't know where I was going with that, where we're going to get into, but we're going to take care of our signs and symptoms a little bit with that. So let me get our Jamboard open. Okay, so that should be coming at you in the chat again. I'm going to leave let me know if this is a problem. Last time I switched our presentation for the whiteboard, but I'm going to I was going to leave my screen up at the presentation so we can kind of jump back and forth a little bit clearer. But if you're having problems seeing that, I think we just lost that. Hold on. Here we go. If you have problems, I'm getting too excited over here with my clicks. If you're having problems, make sure you show me, let me know. But yes, in your chat, there's the whiteboard to put in there. So if you can pull up a kind of a tab, and then I'll tell you when to come back to the meeting so you can see that, okay? So once again, I'm gonna pull out some Post-its. We're gonna start with physical. Don't worry, you don't have to have all the answers. This is just sharing. Lots of you shared with us the first time around that you had some experiences in your life that might have brought this up. And so I thought it might be helpful. There's also some book pages. So if you're not sure and you want to contribute, you can always cheat and use the book. I don't call it as cheating, but go ahead and use that. But what are some signs and symptoms that might be, that we might see or have reported to us for somebody who is experiencing a mental health crisis or kind of in starting to become in an unwell state. And so go ahead and use your Jamboard, use Post-its, use the text thing. We're going to start with just physical, and then we'll jump onto the other ones.
Chris, we're in a view only, so we can't add.
I was just looking at that. That is no good. Okay. Whoops. Okay, everybody. My saving is done. Refresh your screens. All right. So we're going to just take a minute and brainstorm. If you're still on view only, make sure you might want to even close it and click the link again and reopen it. If you're having problems, try clicking on the left. Either look for the fourth one that looks like a piece of paper with writing, or the second from the bottom, which is a box with a T in it. That'll give you a little more ability to type. Looks like somebody's struggling with that, and I don't want you to. Yeah. I feel like I'm with my people here. Like, I don't even really need to teach you. You all know this. We just need to bring it to the light. This group is rocking. Mindy, I'm wondering if it flips your tab or it hides it behind another one. It says it kicks you out of the meeting, and typically for me, it either layers windows or switches my tab on me. I don't know how your browser is set up, but it might be layering windows one on top of the other. Oh, and now that I think about it, it might be your device. If you're running a slightly older device, for example, one of the things is an old Apple, it does not do well with the two things open. That might be it, Mindy. Throw some things in the chat, Mindy, and we'll get them over there for you. Brand new iPad should not be the problem, Mindy. It's the old ones. Yeah, throw stuff in the chat. We'll be happy to get it over there for you. And then after this little section, I'll make a note to make sure I always share the whiteboard so you can see it, Mindy. Okay, I'm going to move a few things around. I'm not trying to take anybody off, but I'm going to move a few things that does tend to pile on top. And I want to make sure that everybody's little pieces get seen. There's another one. Over here's a spot. There we go. I think you've pretty much gotten them. There's just a few that I was like kind of looking for that I want to make sure in here. and these are harder because we wouldn't necessarily see that. So if you come back to the meeting, I'm gonna click on our presentation and kind of bring some things up for you. So these first one, these cardiovascular ones, you might not necessarily see. They're not as much of signs, they're more the symptoms when they tell you they're having racing hearts or chest pains. The one that you might see is the blushing from that heat kind of coming up. But those would be ones to also think about in there. The breathing is another one in there. If you see kind of people like hyperventilating often, or that kind of piece in there can throw things in there as well. But I think other than that, you've gotten a lot of the other ones like that we'll come to in just a minute. I'm just scanning because I saw a couple more go in there. Okay. Like neurological, once again, if they're complaining of headaches or the sweating, that kind of also goes with that beating heart that goes really fast. They'll talk about stomach pains, but you got that one over here. People talked about the weight gain or weight loss, which has to do a lot with the that intestinal piece as well. Changes in their diet, changes in their interest in their food, right? Another one to point out is kind of if you see people kind of shaking or having tremors at some point in time, so they don't seem real bad. They're not necessarily impacting constantly. So that would be another one to kind of look for. But you've nailed these, like the pattern adjustments. You talked about that, like the changes in eating, the changes in sleep. You talked about the appearance changes. You've talked about the a lot with the changes of where they dress or how they like do upkeep, or the changes in their sleep patterns. So all of those pattern and appearance ones, right on. Those are all of the signs that we would probably see. Those are very common and things that we can see. So kind of a little more easier for us to grasp onto, okay? Hormonal pieces, once again, is going to be stuff that they would report to you. And I'll be honest, they're going to be the least likely thing for them to report for us as well, okay? All right, next one, think about emotions and behaviors. So I'm gonna get us a new page here on our Jamboard. So if you wanna jump back to that, I'm gonna do them all on the same page. You can just, right away, it doesn't have to be, on here they're gonna separate them, but we don't have to separate them. So go ahead to slide 2. What that would be at the top, you'll see a little kind of slideshow picture. It probably says 1 out of 3. And if you use the right button, it will get you to 2 out of 3. And then you'll be able to add to the second slide on our Jamboard. Basically, we're creating a slide together, a slideshow. Mindy, and if you put any in we got one in you. Mindy, we're doing emotions and behaviors. If you have any, put them in the chat. I'll copy them over for you and get them to the spreadsheet or to the Jamboard. Okay, let me see what we got over here. Jennifer, I got yours over there. So you should see it kind of come up. Once again, I'm not trying to steal anybody's. I'm just moving them so we can read them all. You can write right on there. People are worried about erasing those lines. Don't erase them. Just make them into letters. It's all good here. It's brainstorm. Mindy, we're adding signs and symptoms to watch for emotions and behaviors that might be signs or symptoms. If you have any to put in the chat, I'll copy them over to the Jamboard for you. But I'm gonna bring some up on the screen so you can stay in the meeting. Don't worry about getting to the Jamboard, but if you wanted to add something to it, I'd be happy to copy it over for you. This one, there we go. Okay. Give it another minute for, got some more that came in, just trying to make some space again. That's just one there. I feel like there was, yeah, there's a couple over here. I can usually tell when there we go. Yep. Okay. Okay. Fabulous job, everyone. We've got lots of things in here for you to see. Let's go through a few I just want to highlight. You've got the mood swings, but let me pull up these ones. Anxiety is one I'd like to highlight. Sometimes it comes out that way. Anxiety or guilt. You've nailed kind of some of the other ones with irritability being kind of emotional or kind of that lack of emotion in there. Just kind of that piece to it. You've also got the low self-esteem in your reflected in yours. The third one here is the one that I wanted to make sure. The inability to manage responsibilities would be one that I want to highlight as well. Youth sometimes have a problem, inability to manage responsibilities. That's part of being an adolescent and learning how, like, they're not adults yet, they're not ready to adult, right? But a change in that ability, somebody who's usually pretty good at getting their homework done or knows when they need to ask for help and those kinds of things, and a change in that, or somebody did kind of put it in here, like all of a sudden being very attentive to really fine details, kind of that flip piece. So just one of those things to think about. But all of the other things that you kind of got in here, the one